Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Survivor Talks with Mike. Buckle in for a long one. Today we'll be going over the finale and the post-show from Survivor 41. We'll be stopping to talk about each player as they exit the game. So not to waste any more time, let's jump right into the recap. We open with Jeff introducing the episode. Says they will announce the winner on location for the first time since Borneo. We then go to through each player that remains in the game, giving a confessional saying how they each can win, or at least they think they can. They come to their new island and try to settle in. Deshawn tries to explain his position and why he tried to blow up Erica's game. Erica is angry and vents to Ricard. Ricard likes this because it might give him an opening to stay in the game. Deshawn is still trying to amplify Ricard's game so that everyone knows that he is going to win if he makes it to the end. Erica tries to talk to Heather, but she's still angry about the tribal council. They each get a hint to a final advantage. They have to solve a word puzzle, which gives them a hint to find the advantage. Erica is the last to solve the puzzle, but stumbles across the advantage still. We then go to the immunity challenge, where Erica reveals her advantage. It's a 4-phase challenge. They knock off rope rungs that are hanging high above, use those ropes to make a ladder, and then work a ring with puzzle pieces up another ladder. Then they put together a 75-piece puzzle. Erica's advantage is that she gets 4 of her ropes already down and placed on the ladder, and her ring with the puzzles is already up 4 rungs of the second ladder, giving her a total of 12 obstacle head start ahead of the others. Erica just barely wins over Ricard despite her advantage. She gets to take someone for a reward of steak. She takes Heather to try to make amends with her. So at their reward dinner, Erica and Heather discuss what happened. There's no animosity between them, but they are angry with Deshawn. They're so angry to the point that they are thinking that they could keep Ricard in the game because they like him more and would be more okay with him winning than if Deshawn ends up winning. Back at camp, everyone discusses Deshawn versus Ricard. Ricard talks to everyone, tries to convince them to keep him around. Him and Xander have a heart-to-heart. He reveals to him that he has a baby on the way back at home, and he's been really hurting by not knowing whether his baby has been born yet or not. Xander is thinking about using his idol to save Ricard. It could be a big move for him that would add to his resume. We then go to tribal council, and the entire tribal council is centered around Ricard and how good of a game he's played. Everything seems to be pointing towards Ricard going home. Ricard gets very vulnerable, tells everyone about the struggles he's been going through. Jeff says how some of the best players to play the game will never win, which maybe Ricard will eventually be seen amongst them. Thinking players like Suri and Ozzy and Malcolm and Rob Sesternino, guys like that. They go to vote, and Jeff asks if anyone has any idols or advantages to play. Xander stands up, and he uses his idol, but he uses it on himself. Ricard is then voted out 4-1, with Ricard's vote going towards Deshawn. Xander's had that idol the entire time, kind of went to waste, never got really used for any good reason. So that kind of ends up being a knock against him. He could have used it for one of his allies along the way, or for himself at another time, perhaps. He could have played a little bit more risky because he had that. So my thoughts on Ricard are that even though he didn't win, he was the best player of the season. He dominated in all aspects of the game. There are 3 pillars to Survivor: strategic, physical, and social, and Ricard was great in each way. Strategically, he was credited with the most, with being behind most of the vote outs, and with the biggest move of the season by getting out Shan. Shan even admitted that he was the brains behind most of their play back in UA. Physically, he won 3 of the immunity challenges, as well as some of the reward challenges, and on top of that, around camp, you would often see him working, like he would be making fires or collecting things for everyone. They didn't outright show it a lot, but you could see him in the background doing stuff occasionally throughout the entire season. And then socially, he was well liked by everyone. Even to the point that some players were close to putting their own games at risk to keep him around. That's something we haven't really seen since JT in Season 18 Tokagenes. I absolutely think we will see him return in another season, and can't wait for when we do. He might have a big target on his back because of how well he did, but I just can't wait to see him try to play again. Back at camp, they are all celebrating making Final Four. For the first time, we see rain hit them hard through the night. Since they were brought to a new island, they don't have a shelter built. They're all worried they won't sleep, but Xander is excited. He feels like he'll thrive on the others' suffering. At the challenge, this will decide who makes Final 3 and has the power to choose who goes to fire making. The challenge, they have to walk on a balance beam that rocks with your weight and place blocks that spell Final 3 that they have to keep balanced with the right amount of tension on a rope. I will say this challenge clearly gives an advantage to those with longer reach. If you watched like Erica and Heather, they really had to lean their bodies over to reach where they had to put the blocks, whereas Xander and Deshawn didn't really have to. They could just reach their arm out and place it. Xander, who has the longest arms there, wins. Xander breaks down for winning, says when he was a kid, he didn't have the confidence to even think he would ever be on Survivor. Just to touch back on that challenge, though, I don't mind that as a challenge, but I think that's one that could be earlier in the post-merge. I don't want the challenge that decides who's going to be in the Final 3 to have any advantage for one person or another. It should be just how much do you want it? Like they used to do a long time ago where you just had to keep your hand on the immunity idol. And if you took your hand off, then you were out. It took a long time, and I know that production doesn't really like that. But it really showed who was really fighting for this. And like you go back to Palau where they just had to stay holding onto a buoy the longest, and it went for like 12 hours, and that was exciting. It was a long time. I know Jeff got really bored needing to sit out there waiting, but for TV it made a really exciting moment where they got emotional, and I'd like to see them go back to challenges like that for at the Final Four. So back at camp, we finally get some more personal content from Xander, how he was insecure about his weight when he was younger, joined the cross-country team, and found that he was really good at running. Everyone makes their pitch to Xander to save them and not make fire. Deshawn and Heather each say that Erica can beat him at the end. Erica says she's fine with whatever he wants to do. And Xander says that he's saving Erica, so Deshawn and Heather will make fire. Deshawn is worried since he has struggled the entire time with fire. Xander sees Erica cannot make fire, which makes him think he should just make fire against her to knock her out, and add something more to his resume. At Tribal Council, Xander reveals that he thinks that Erica isn't seen as that big of a threat from the jury, which we then cut to Shan in the jury, who reacts by saying it's a bad read. And I agree with her, obviously, as we know the outcome. Deshawn and Heather will be making fire. So for the fire making challenge, Deshawn gets fire first, but Heather isn't far behind. Deshawn then smothers his fire by putting way too many sticks on too quickly, and it goes out. Heather builds up her fire to the point that it starts hitting the rope and starts to singe it a bit, but then it starts to die back down, and Deshawn gets his fire going again and builds it right up directly on the rope. They are both burning their ropes at the same time, and Deshawn's breaks first with Heather's just seconds behind. Deshawn, Xander, and Erica are going to be our final three. So I don't really have too many thoughts on Heather. She was barely in the show at all. It's weird that somebody that made it all the way to Final Four and was even in probably the most exciting fire-making challenge to date was shown so little. To help put it into perspective, Heather had 13 confessionals the entire season. In episode 5 alone, Shan had 13 confessionals. Even up to episode 7, she only had 2 confessionals, which tied her for last with Abraham, the first person voted out. And she was still tied with Sarah, the other first episode boot, after episode 8. I know we've had some invisible players throughout the years, but I don't think we've ever had one that made it to the finale that was this bad. I am certain that we will not see Heather again, and I'm okay with that. She seems like a nice lady, but obviously they didn't really see much of her for putting on screen, so I'm okay with her not returning. We go back to camp. They're all so happy to finally be at the final 3. Xander feels he's checked everything off his Survivor checklist. He just needs to win now. Erica feels she's dominated the endgame by flipping the game on its head with the hourglass twist and then creating the alliance that took things over at the end. Deshawn feels like he thrived and is really proud of the game he played. We then go to Final Tribal Council. Evie congratulates them on making it there, but each of them could make a very strong case to win. They each break down their games after Danny asks them to separate what their strategy was through the pre-merge, post-merge, and then final 8. They try to explain the social aspects of their game. Deshawn said that he connected with everyone, but they also realized that this meant that he betrayed a lot of people. Erica says that she focused on a smaller group of people to make real connections with, that she could more easily manage. And Xander kind of blanks on this question. He has a really tough time thinking of what the social game was to him, and that makes him look really bad, I think. And Ricard asks Xander why he didn't put Erica in the fire making. He says he realizes that he made a bad read on Erica's threat level and didn't want her to add something to her resume by winning. Danny congratulates Erica on playing a great game. Liana makes a joke by asking if Xander has an idol, and then they go vote. Jeff reads the votes on location, and Erica wins, with Deshawn getting 1 vote to come in second and Xander with 0 for third. So my thoughts on Xander were that he was a little young and didn't have a strong social game. I think with a little more maturity, he could be a really good player. He just needs to learn how to read people a little better and come across as more genuine. Otherwise, he was very good, and I think the reason we've seen so much of him throughout the show was that he gave good confessionals. He said silly or fun things and really just played into the camera. I think if he ever plays again, which I think he will, as long as he doesn't try to overcompensate for losing this time, he could do just as well, if not better. Deshawn, my thoughts on Deshawn are that he played an emotionally driven game, and while he didn't really have a full game, I think the other players respected his vulnerability. Him and Xander actually tied for the most confessionals, and based on the editing, I thought he was being made out to be the winner, since even though he played a sloppy game, he always got to explain what he was doing, even if it was the wrong choice at times. I think a lot of his game came down to the perception other people had of him. Obviously, since we got to see his explanation for his moves, it didn't look too bad from a viewer standpoint, but the other players didn't see that, and all they seen was the emotionally driven side of his game. I could see him playing again in the future, and I definitely think he would do better, as it seems like he really learned a lot about himself out there. And then for Erica, congratulations to her for winning Survivor 41. As a fellow Canadian, I couldn't be happier for her. I think she absolutely played the strongest game of the final three and easily had the best final tribal council performance. The only knock I have against her is that she would have been voted out at the merge if not for the hourglass twist, and that final advantage she got in the final five challenge was a little too big of an advantage. So not really any of her fault, more on production side for basically creating a winner. Um, she played the game that was presented to her, and she played it perfectly. The strongest part of her game was her threat level management. She wasn't the biggest threat until the very end when it was too late to do anything about it. I'm not sure that her game is repeatable since she was reliant on the twists to get to the end, but I think she's the type of player that could find a way to the end anyways. So as for the post show, this held on location right after Erica was revealed as the winner. They get pizza and champagne, or water for Xander since he's underage. Jeff gets to host the talk show that he always wanted. Erica talks about how the way she looks makes her seem unthreatening and she can take advantage of that. She talks about how Exile changed her game. Xander talks about how proud he is of the game he played and how he just made a really bad read on Erica that might have been what cost him his game. Deshawn said he didn't really realize that he was perceived as emotionally as he was and looks forward to learning from the experience on the rewatch. They talk about it being 26 days, but they all feel like they still got a full experience out of it. They talked about the Beware advantage. Xander just jumped into it wanting it. Shan knew she wanted it, even though she already knew the risk. And Nasir talks about how he practiced saying the phrase over and over. He found a little place to hide and keep practicing it. They discuss the knowledge is power advantage and how Xander, Evie, and Tiffany tricked Liana and their plan to do that and how perfectly it worked out for them. Liana swears while explaining herself and immediately realizes she's on TV. It was a pretty funny moment. Nasir then talks about how he was used to the island and was proud about how he was able to reconnect to his childhood and hopes he inspired others that came from poverty and had very little. They can live their dreams. That's what he was hoping he inspired. Evie talks about not thinking they could do as well as they did and thought they might struggle physically when they actually thrived. Ricard talks about how he is struggling with coming to terms with not winning, but still feeling more proud of himself for how well he did despite not winning. Danny talks about how the experience really helped him slay the demon of his dad's passing. Jeff tells us that the pizza was made by their staff and that it's really good. This is him probably trying to make a point about how it's become a bit of a joke that Survivor pizza isn't that good generally. But it's pizza. It's always good. They tease Survivor 42. It's being filmed immediately after and reusing some of the twists from 41. I'm a little bit worried about that since they don't have the fan feedback yet to know how poorly received some of them were. But it should once again be a fun, fast-paced season. My review of this episode is that it was a phenomenal finale. My only issue was how the last advantage was handled. The puzzle and the hint were fine, but since they were on a new island, it was really just luck to stumble upon it because they didn't really know where any of the landmarks from that island would be yet. And then the advantage was a little too big of a head start in that challenge. With that big of an advantage, Erica would have had to really mess up in order to lose. Otherwise, the rest of the episode was really good. with probably the best fire making challenge ever, a deserving winner, and a fun little after show. I'd give this finale a 9 out of 10. That ends the coverage for Survivor 41. Next week I will do a full season review, and then after that we'll start going into some older stuff in other seasons. I'm really looking forward to it. We're going to start with Borneo, season 1, and talk about some different topics from there, and move our way through the seasons until season 42 comes, and then we'll go back to covering it, and then once that's done, we'll pick back up wherever we left off. So lots coming up here still, even though the season's over. So I'm looking forward to discussing some new things. I've got some big plans for it. Thank you for watching, and if you'd like to watch any of that, please subscribe and hit like. It really helps the channel.